Hello, hello, welcome to episode 75. Can you believe it? In the Van Gogh Letters series. And today we're going to go down a route that I think is unavoidable, although it's a route that I don't think we explicitly acknowledge when we're dealing with Van Gogh. And in this episode 75, I want you guys to be vulnerable, to acknowledge some of the disasters in your own life, not someone else's, your life. And I'm going to help you to do that by taking you through a completely different story, and then a little bit of my story, and then maybe you can either, you don't have to, maybe you can share your story in the comments, or you can just acknowledge quietly to yourself whatever trials and tribulations you've been through. So it's going to be quite an interesting episode. We're going to deal with some really interesting territory in terms of the letters. But before we do, I want to ask you what you think of this portrait. What do you think of that portrait? Any thoughts? It's pretty yellow, isn't it? Thanks, Alina. Hello, everyone. Yvonne, always good to see you here. Stephanie, Carol Murray, Chelsea in Canada. I wonder whether we're going to see Bria. Bria used to be a regular. Mel says, I think it looks sickly. Let's put it up a little bit bigger. Stephanie says, side profile. What do you guys think of that? Yvonne says, looks stern and stoic. Does this self-portrait feel like all the others in a certain way? Does it sort of, look at the eyes, look at just the technique. Does it feel authentically Van Gogh? Rookie says, I think it's good. Well, I think that's, Rookie, I think you've got a good avatar name there. Josie says it's not his best self-portrait. So there are serious questions about the authenticity of this particular work. And this is where art and true crime overlap in a big way, in terms of, is someone trying to commit art fraud? And what makes it certainly kind of complicated is some really distinguished experts will tell you that is a genuine Van Gogh. And then some other experts will tell you there's no way that that's a genuine Van Gogh. So before we go into this a little bit further, what do you think? Do you think that's a genuine Van Gogh or not? And let me first of all say that there are art experts, museum experts that say it is. What do you say? Let's do a quick poll. How many of you say it's authentic? How many of you say it's not? Make sure you vote in the poll. If you haven't voted already, make sure you vote in the poll. So far, 2/3 of you say he knew he had syphilis. Around a quarter say no, and less than 10% say there's just no way of knowing whether he did or he didn't. So are you saying it looks, are you saying it's fake or real, authentic or inauthentic? It looks like most of you are saying you think it's a fake. Now, you must bear in mind, if you say that, I'm telling you that there are art experts that say this is not a fake. Are you going against art experts? Mel Stiller says, I think it's authentic. I think Mel Stiller so far is the only one who thinks it could be the real thing. So I'll give you my opinion. I don't think it's authentic, but this is how difficult it is to deal with a question like this one way or the other, right? And we're going to go to this article by Guess Who. Just not sure why this is so difficult to. I'm not sure if it's going to allow me to read this article on this computer. That's a bummer. Looks like I'm just going to have to quickly register. It did allow me to view to view this article on the other computer. So anyway, sorry about that. Just give me a second. Sorry, this is something I really didn't anticipate. What am I missing? Well, that's definitely not sure I'm going to do this because it's not really allowing me to access this article. So I read the article on my other computer. On this computer, it's basically not allowing me to access it. It's basically saying this, subscribe for £17. So I guess let me try and do that quickly and then see what happens. Sorry about this. I just had no way of predicting that that's what would happen. Well, definitely is frustrating. I actually think what I'm going to do is just point you guys in the right direction. You guys can cover this on your own time. So here is the link. See if you guys can open that on your own browsers or whatever. So basically, what I wanted to demonstrate to you guys is the long journey that one particular portrait took to basically authenticity, and then it was declared a fake, and then some people think it's a fake and some people don't. So it's kind of an inexact science, right? Would be fascinating to share it with you, but unfortunately, I just can't do it very quickly. The other thing that I wanted to impress upon you guys is, yeah, you have an artist in February 1889, and he's penniless, and he can't sell a single artwork, and he's been kicked out of his own home. His status is at its lowest ebb, right? And then basically 30 years later, people are so enamored with his work that they're actually forging his art. And you might say, but that's not a forgery. Well, let's say this one is genuine. I don't think it is, but let's say it is. There are a lot of other Van Goghs that are fakes. Some are terrible fakes, and some are not bad fakes. I even believe the one portrait of Dr. Gachet is a fake. Um, and so think about that. You've got somebody who can't even sell a picture in his life, and a couple of years later, there's this industry of forgeries. They forge his diary, they forge his sketches, they forge his paintings. People are stealing his art, and then there's a big investigation, and then people find some of it. It's just quite an incredible journey from someone who was so invisible, and someone who was basically kicked out of a town, to someone is regarded as highly as he is today. You know, what a turn of events. But the part that I think is so sad is that, he wasn't really acknowledged in his own lifetime. Pretty much the only person who knew what he was worth was himself, to some extent his brother, and one or two people besides that. But it was basically only Van Gogh who believed in himself, right? And so he did all of this work, um, only to uh, die penniless. Isn't that tragic? And it's one thing to say that. It's one thing to think about it in a cerebral way. Okay, I guess he worked very hard, and then he died, and all that effort didn't amount to nothing. It amounted to nothing in his life, but it amounted to a huge fortune for other people who benefited from his work, other people who bought his art, who traded in his art, who collected his art, who happened to have his art, made millions off the back of his work, kind of thing. I'm just going to try one more time, just see if I can quickly subscribe here. Let's just see if I can quickly do it. No, it's not going to allow me to do it quickly. Okay. Anyway, I did try. That's really unfortunate. That was the planned way that I was going to start this live was taking you through that narrative. So I think if you've got the link, please go and read it on your own time, and I'm sure you'll find it really interesting. I did read the whole article, and I really wanted to share it with you guys. So anyway, what we're going to do instead of that is we're going to go a little bit back in time. We were going to deal with this letter from the second letter from Reverend Souls to Theo, dated basically in chronological time would be tomorrow, the 26th of February. And we're going to get to this letter, but we actually skipped this letter from the 3rd of February. And what you're going to notice from this letter from the 3rd of February is what a rosy picture Van Gogh is actually sketching of what's going on. You know, he's basically saying the cup isn't just half full, it's almost full anyway. And one's got to see in context the Gabby Petito-ifying of his story, because he wants the adventure to continue. So in other words, he's not really being honest with his brother. He's not acknowledging how bad things are with himself, how serious things are with the people around him, because his brother is his benefactor. It doesn't really make sense for him to tell his brother, Theo, guess what? Shit is happening. Because then Theo is probably going to be very cautious about the adventure continuing. And for the adventure to continue, Theo's got to keep sending money towards the upkeep of the Yellow House. The alternative is that Theo says to Vincent, brother, come back. Come back, it'll be cheaper, come and stay with me. I don't really know what the solution is, but it's obviously not in all. So come back. And that's exactly what his brother fears. His brother sort of fears, Vincent thinks if Theo quits on me now, then I face another nightmare, which is going back to Paris with my tail between my legs and kind of my brother being my keeper, like literally staying in the same house and him calling the shots kind of thing. And although he ends up doing that in a way, he does go back to Paris. At this point, he still thinks that there's an adventure still waiting for him. So thanks, Stephanie, for putting that out there. It's actually thanks to Stephanie that we are going back to this letter. I actually missed it because of these paintings. I thought we'd already covered it. Okay, so you guys ready? Thanks for your compliments on the shirt. It is a new shirt. I got it the other day. So this is what he writes. My dear Theo, I should have preferred to reply at once to your kind letter containing the 100 francs, but since at that precise moment I was very tired and the doctor had given me strict instructions to go out for walks and make no mental exertion, I haven't written to you until today. As far as work is concerned, this month hasn't been bad on the whole, and as the work takes my mind off things, or rather keeps me in order, I don't deprive myself of it. Now I'm going to skip through all of this. I'm going to skip through where he talks about La Bercuse, and then he says, but I can tell you this, that the local dialect spoken here sounds so musical in the mouths of the Arlesiens that I actually pick up snatches of it every now and then. Perhaps there's an attempt at a medley of local color in La Bercuse. It's badly painted, and in a sense, cheap chromas are infinitely better done, but even so. Here, the so-called worthy town of Arles is such a peculiar sort of place that it is with good reason that our friend Gauguin calls it the filthiest spot in the south. Now, what's quite strange with Van Gogh is that he's capable of being quite cryptic. And this letter really proves really demonstrates just how cryptic Van Gogh can be. We've seen little hints of where he describes Gauguin and kind of hints at weapons of war and the ear incident in sort of very obtuse ways. But in this letter, you're going to be left in no doubt that he's quite a cryptic fellow when he wants to be. And why do you think he calls it the so-called worthy town of Arles? So in other words, is he saying Arles is a worthy town, a good town, a town of good repute, an honorable town? Is he saying, is his own opinion of Arles that Arles is a decent place? What do you think he means by so-called worthy town of Arles? Well said, Leslie. I think so too. I think he was basically being a little bit sarcastic. In other words, he's saying Arles isn't a very worthy place, that there's some scumbags here, you know. And then he says, it is with good reason our friend Gauguin calls it the filthiest spot in the south. What do you think he means by that? Filthiest spot in the south, in what way? And it could mean that they are, you know, it's almost like a cowboy town, you know, those houses where prostitutes go. Sometimes you can have isn't there a movie, The Something House in Texas? Isn't there a movie something to do with that? But you know, could it be because of the prostitutes? Could it be because of the diseases that are in that town? Could it be because the people are antagonistic to immigrants? What could the reason be? Could it literally be dirty? Because I mean, he's been pretty happy there until now. Anyway, he says, now if Reveille saw the population, he'd certainly have some bad moments. So now you've got to ask this question, so-called worthy town, good reason, he calls it filthy, and then he refers to someone called Reveille. Who's Reveille? And he's saying that if this guy saw the population of Arles, he'd say, wow, you guys are in a sorry state, all of you, meaning this community is really basically sick. Still, once you've had the local disease, you'll never catch it again. And there is more precise about what he's talking to. He's saying, you know what is going on in the so-called worthy town of Arles, this filthiest spot in the south, is saying there's a lot of local disease here, but what kind of disease? And what is the title or what is the poll in today's video? Do you think Van Gogh knew he had syphilis? And at the moment, about 2/3 say yes. It's up to about 12% say there's just no way we can know, right? Well, have a look at the postscript. I don't want to jump the gun too much, but if you go to the postscript to this letter, remember it says here Reveille, right? Reveille. Can you guys see that? Reveille. And if we go to the postscript of this letter, it refers to Reveille right at the bottom. Oh, no, it's not Reveille, it's record. Not quite sure who Reveille is. So sorry, that kind of messes up the argument I wanted to make there. Anyway, we are going to deal with the whole disease thing. anyway, so he says something about you've had the local disease, you'll never catch it again. Okay, so he goes on to say, when I came out of hospital, sorry, we here, which is just to let you know that as far as I am concerned, I have no illusions about myself. And again, the question here is, did Van Gogh know that he had syphilis? And so he's saying, I've got no illusions about myself. Doesn't that mean I know what's going on with myself? Then he says, things are going very, very well, and I'll do everything the doctor says, but but what? Is he going to carry on drinking? Is he going to carry on womanizing? And all things going very, very well. Anyway, then he says, when I came out of hospital with good old Roulin, I fancied there'd been nothing wrong with me. It was only afterwards I felt I'd been ill. Okay, Timmy, come. By the way, you guys must get a good look at Timmy. He's scheduled to have a proper bath tomorrow. It's kicking my keyboard, so if the that was a close one. Any harder, and the monitor would have gone teetering over. Timmy's getting a proper grooming tomorrow, very overdue. So get a good look at him. So he says, when I came out of hospital with good old Roulin, I fancied there'd been nothing wrong with me. It was only afterwards I felt I'd been ill. And so one does have to wonder, what did the doctors say to him? You know, the ear incident is in a way a smokescreen, is in a way a diversion. Something else is going on with Van Gogh beyond his ear, right? And so, what is that all about? What is that all about? He says, I have moments when I'm twisted with enthusiasm or madness or prophecy. I display great presence of mind, then in my words, and speak like the Arlesians, but in spite of all that, my spirits are very low, especially when my physical strength returns. But I've already told Ray that at the first sign of a serious symptom, I would come back and submit myself to the alienness in A or to himself. What else except pain and suffering can we expect if we are not well, you and I? And there he is actually kind of including his brother almost in the same thing, that isn't Theo also suffering? And we're going to deal with that in a little bit more detail in a moment. The original title I made for this video was that Vincent and Theo are living in like a parallel universe. Vincent is about to be kicked out of his home and he's got to find a new home, and he's sick. And also Theo, although Theo's not been kicked out of his home, Theo is looking for a new home, and Theo's also ill. So both brothers are going through the same thing, moving, and they're ill, right? You've also got to take note of these references to madness. Do you think someone who is mad refers to themselves as mad? Do you think someone who is mad knows that they're mad? And I think there is an argument where you can say someone who can tell that they're becoming unhinged may have some consciousness of it. But I mean, if you look at it within the context of his whole letter, his letter is pretty, it's got some cryptic remarks in it. It's pretty eloquent, right? But what is he really saying here? And, if we say that there's some kind of disease that he's referring to. What is he really talking about? And he's also saying, once you catch it, you'll never catch it again. Once you have it, you have it. You can't catch it again. So what is he really referring to? And in this respect, I just want to remind you, did you know that Theo died 6 months after Vincent, which actually means that Theo died younger than his brother, who was older than him, and Theo died of syphilis. So even if Van Gogh had survived the gunshot wound, I don't know if he would have lived much longer than he did live. I don't think the fates had ordained that he would live terribly much longer. Having said that, Gauguin had syphilis and he lived to a grand old age. But anyway, have a look at this. And just a little bit of a warning, this might be quite upsetting to some of you. So this is from Wikipedia. There's Theo. Let me bring it up a little bit bigger. And yeah, you have Theo was often concerned about Vincent's mental condition. However, just want to get to that part. There you have it. Vincent died in July at age 37. Theo suffered from dementia paralytica, right? Or syphilitic paresis, a severe neuropsychiatric disorder, right? And so isn't that the same thing that Vincent had? Now understood as late stage neurosyphilis. And there's a description: the infection of the central nervous system in a patient with syphilis. And his health declined rapidly after Vincent's death. Weak and unable to come to terms with Vincent's absence, he died 6 months later. And what is not really mentioned here is that poor Jo, when Jo was visiting her brother in the asylum, when Jo was visiting her husband in the asylum, he was hysterical. He was basically this crazed fellow. And what do you think was causing it? Do you think it was because he was drinking absinthe? Do you think it was because his art didn't sell? Do you think it was because Vincent's life as a bachelor was far more preferable to his, or any of that nonsense? No, just because syphilis was taking its making its way through his body and pulling certain strings, right? So what you've got to bear that in mind. You know, it's not like just a mad artist in and of itself. That madness is associated with a STD, basically, in its advanced stages. And a lot of the art experts will say Vincent was too young to have neurosyphilis, but how does that argument work if his brother had it and his brother was younger? Okay. So what's interesting here is how he describes what is happening in kind of a plural sense. What he's saying is he's obviously feeling this himself. He's describing it as something that Theo is also going through. He says, our ambition has been dashed so low. So let us work very calmly, look after ourselves as best we can, and not exhaust ourselves in futile attempts at mutual generosity. But that's the part I want to highlight here. Not exhaust ourselves in futile attempts. And this is where I want to take the narrative out of this sort of dry, where you just look at it, words on paper, words on your screen, and kind of bring them to life. Again, I really would have liked to have shown you that article from the art newspaper, because it shows you all this fuss over what is probably a forgery and how much this forgery was sought after by the Kröller-Müller Museum. I've actually been to it in the Netherlands. How certain experts either gave it the nod of approval, and some said, no, it's definitely a fraud, a fake. And this is all the afterlife, probably not even of a Van Gogh work, the afterlife of this force of nature that was Van Gogh, right? Meanwhile, these other artworks are selling for millions at that time. And so how I want to do this is I want to tell you guys two stories, and I want to encourage you guys to also share perhaps some of your stories. You don't have to share it in absolute detail, but look at these words. Our ambition has been dashed so low. So let us work very calmly, look after ourselves as best we can, and not exhaust ourselves in futile attempts, right? So I'm going to tell you two stories, and I think I'm going to put a link so that you guys can also watch this on your own time. I don't know whether it's going to make as much of an impression.
Okay, so we've had a
I don't know if it's going to make as much of an impression on you as it had on me, but I've got a feeling it just might. Just trying to get the link here.
Okay, I'm coming to you from.
I think this is the right one. Maybe it's not.
Okay, so we've had a.
What is going on? I'm sure it was this. Well, I don't have time to absolutely verify if I got the right link, but let's just continue anyway. So there's a channel I watch when I'm running on my treadmill when I need a little bit of inspiration, and there's a British triathlete. Her name's Lucy Charles, and because she married someone, her name is Lucy Charles Barkley, and her channel is called Team Charles Barkley. And her story is basically that at school she was an extremely competitive person. She just wanted to take part in the Olympics since she was a child. And her parents described her as just absolutely fearless. She, if they didn't watch her when she was swimming, she would go into the deep end. If they didn't watch her in the garden, she would climb up and sit on a basketball net. A basketball, is it a hoop? But just a very fiercely physical, fiercely athletic, fiercely competitive kind of individual. And her best friend, I think it's in this video, basically says that that she was always swimming. Like she'd arrive at school having swum at 4 o'clock in the morning. Her hair was wet, and she was just swimming, and nobody could understand her. She was a kind of in a sports sense, the Van Gogh of sport. And she was just constantly swimming, and no one could understand, like, why are you doing this? And all her friends would be at school in makeup and trying to impress boys, and she was just really interested in sport, and she always knew she'd be a professional athlete. And she did incredibly well. Her coach would say that she was by far her best swimmer, and she worked incredibly hard, and she achieved she achieved the highest marks, or the highest achievements possible, in the situation that she was in. She became number one in her state, or in her county, I guess, and then she competed at a national level, and I think she also was, amongst the best in the country. And then it came down to, she was aiming for the 2012 Olympics. While she was at school, she'd always wanted to be an Olympic athlete. She was aiming for the 2012 Olympics, and then it came down to a committee, and the British Olympic Committee just didn't choose her. So it wasn't like a thing where you qualify and then you automatically go through. I think she had qualified. It was up to this committee to decide whether she would compete or not, and they decided that she wouldn't, right? And again, look at these words on screen. Do not exhaust ourselves in futile attempts. And so, and I can attest to this, because I've swam since I was about 4 years old. I swam till I was about 12 years old, so 8 years, and also got state colors. I was the number one swimmer in my state. I even got a trophy, most dedicated swimmer. But the point being, I understand just how hard swimming is as a sport. It's cold, it's lonely, it's takes a lot out of you, and she basically spent her whole youth aiming for this achievement, basically achieved it, only to have a committee decide, should we let Lucy take part in this Olympics? No, let's give it to somebody else. And as far as I know, she continued swimming after that, continued I think she was going to train for the next Olympics, but at some point she basically said, I'm done. At some point, I think she achieved something phenomenal, and then she said she felt nothing. And then she said, well, I'm done with swimming. And her grandmother, who was someone who had supported her all along, no matter whether she won or where she came, her grandmother supported her all along. Her grandmother died that day, the day that she said, I'm done. And when she actually reveals this on camera, this is a really strong, resilient person. She actually kind of breaks down a little bit on camera. And you can see that really affected her. Her grandmother was her most committed, consistent supporter. Her grandmother was her Theo. And so when she said, I'm done, whether or not it was related to her grandmother having a heart attack, there's going to be a symbolic trauma associated with that, right? And so, and then this is what happened. She said she's going to stop swimming, and her grandmother died. And then the next thing, she went to work for a zoo. She went and did marketing for a zoo, and she was sort of in a meerkat sanctuary, and that was what her life was. From this person who was basically one of the most promising swimmers in Britain, one of the most dedicated people in her environment. The next thing, she was kind of just a nobody working in a zoo. And then her boyfriend said, I think we need to challenge ourselves. Well, I think she said this to her boyfriend, but they basically agreed that they need to challenge themselves. And the next thing, they'd signed up for an Ironman, and that's an Ironman triathlon. This is before they'd done any triathlon in their lives. So the first triathlon they were going to do is going to be an Ironman triathlon. Anyway, long story short, today Lucy is the world Ironman champion. And so the story that I'm trying to share with you is that whole swimming thing was actually ultimately a futile attempt. However, it was also, she didn't really know it, but it was training for something else. All of that hardness, all of that dedication, all of that ability to suffer, all of that work had taught her how to be an athlete and also taught her how to deal with disappointment, right? The difference between Lucy Charles Barkley and Vincent van Gogh is that Vincent van Gogh also worked extremely hard. He just never got to be world champion in his own life, which is pretty horrible. To work so hard, and you work so hard and you deserve whatever it is, except you just don't get it. And that is unfortunately a reality in life, that in life you don't necessarily get what you deserve. Often you can work hard and you get results, but often also you can work very hard and be shortchanged and be cheated and have things turn out in a very unfair way. And then how do you deal with that, right? Now, I don't know if that's already rung a few bells in your own lives. Have you had a similar thing where you've really wrung yourself out? You've really put yourself on the line. You've expended years of your life in pursuit of a particular goal, only for it to be lost. Is there anyone here that can think about something like that that's happened to them? Mel Stiller says, my bells are going crazy here. Okay. So I'm going to share a little story with you, although I've got quite a few, but I'm going to just share one. And although in the true crime space, I say, we shouldn't really be too self-indulgent. We shouldn't really make it about ourselves. In this space, I think one does need to certainly acknowledge that journey, and not to feel sorry for ourselves, not to have a pity party, but simply to be aware that this is part of life, that there can be serious setbacks, and then how do you deal with the other side? I would say when I watched this particular video and I heard some of the statements that were being made, it really tugged at my heartstrings because I lived that story myself. And just the other day, I was looking, so this is my story. And how it started was I wanted to do a live stream while I was covering a trial, and I wanted to show you guys on camera my university book, Family Law, Private and Family Law. And I remember that book like a page through it yesterday. And I thought it would be a really nice touch to hold the book up and show some of the highlighted notes and maybe read a paragraph. And so I've got a lot of books in my home, so I started going through my library and couldn't find it there. I started going through boxes and couldn't find it there. Long story short, I went through at quite a lot of difficulty, about 5 or 6 containers, and I just couldn't find that book. I don't know whether I've moved many times in my life. I don't know whether it just got left behind. I don't know whether it's possible I may have collected all my university books at some point and given them back to the university for a small amount of money. It's possible that I did that. For some reason, I just remember holding on to that particular book, but I can't find it. Maybe it is somewhere, but I certainly can't find it. But during that search, I came across a file, a folder, with a lot of my certificates from school, and it's quite thick. It's about that thick, and it's basically just certificates for swimming, for athletics, and for academics. And the thing that struck me was that the first half of my school, so from when I was 5 years old till I guess 11 years old or so, there's just certificates like a I don't know, just a constant flow of paper, like a paper trail. first in this, second, third, first, relay record, just going on and on and on. And then what's shocking is, as soon as I went into high school, almost nothing. Probably maybe 2 or 3 certificates. So basically easily 20 or 30 when I was a little boy, and in high school basically maybe 2 or 3, right? And then I kind of was looking at that and thinking, Jeepers, what the hell happened? What the hell happened? Because it's not like I suddenly lost my talent or I lost my arm or something. What happened when I went to high school? And there's a longer answer and a shorter answer, but the short answer is I got braces on my face. So and so it's literally braces inside my mouth, but also braces on the outside. And so in a weird way, that changed who I was, not from the inside out, but almost like from the outside in. So the people around me suddenly regarded me in a totally different way. And so I think in a weird way, I actually just got shut down. I mean, I didn't like say, I'm going to shut myself down for the next 5 years. But in a certain way, I kind of got shut down. I kind of got muzzled. And I kind of, that's when I started reading a lot more and writing a lot more and kind of going into that. I had already achieved a heck of a lot as a youngster, and I wasn't that interested in it in high school. Although I did continue training, I did play hockey. I think I was second team, third team. But anyway, and then I did train quite hard in high school in swimming. I did get half colors, but I never came close to what I achieved when I was a little kid. And I think the 2 reasons for it were, well, one way to take a kid's confidence away or a teenager's confidence away is, well, muzzle them in a brace, put them in a brace for 5 years. In other words, it just takes away your confidence, your enthusiasm, your motivation, your I don't know, I'm not quite sure what the word is, your spirit. It sort of crushes your spirit. And the other thing was, to some extent, I don't want to blame anybody, but what you hear in the Lucy Charles Barkley thing is, in order for someone who wants to become a top athlete, in order for someone who wants to, become an Olympic athlete, like the bottom of that pyramid, almost like Maslow's pyramid, we spoke about it yesterday, is family support. The bottom of that is you really need your family to totally support what you're doing. And Lucy had that. Lucy had that with her grandmother, but she also had that with her boyfriend who became her husband, and also had that with her parents. I had that until probably high school. My mother was a very strong supporter of me, but in high school, I would say that support started dwindling because of problems at home. Let me just put it that way. And so I didn't really have that support either. So I was kind of being assailed, and I'm not trying to ascribe blame to anybody. I'm not trying to say, I would have been also an Olympian if not for this or that. I don't think I was anywhere near as talented as Lucy, but I certainly, I did make it to 6 in South Africa in triathlon in my age group, number 1 in my state 3 times. Anyway, the point is, in the high school phase, I sort of felt like the support that I would normally get from home and from the people around me was just gone. And although I'm quite a tough person, it's very hard to, in something like swimming, and I think any top level sport, it's very hard to generate that energy like endlessly when you're being bullied and when there are a lot of other ugly things happening. It's just very hard to endlessly generate that kind of creative energy, that kind of, you know what I mean. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying it's very hard for that energy to come out. Um, and this is the issue. You can perform at a very high level. You can perform at a very top level, but the guy next to you that has all the support of his family and he's also got a good, you know, network around him is always going to have a much better energy system than you do, because a lot of your energy is being drained into just this emotional draining thing. It's almost like a something that is just constantly going down the drain. It's a constant drain that's taking place, right? And so you are working in a way harder than the guy next to you, because of, you know, all of this kind of thing. And then you end up emerging through that period with nothing to show for it. And all I'm saying is, when I looked at that file many years later, it's quite a shock. It's like, jeepers, what the hell was wrong with you that you could do all this over here, but over here you couldn't do anything? And then I kind of reflected on it. And that is what I think is really worth also for you reflecting on, is where you burned a couple of matches, where you put a lot of yourself on the line and you actually lost. You gave up years of your life working just as hard as the person next to you, except the person next to you came out with something to show for it, but you didn't. Does that make sense? And so I hope that is kind of demonstrated, that the level of agony that Van Gogh is about to go through. You know, he's put his life on the line and it's about to all be lost, all be squandered. I mean, he's going to emerge out of the asylum with 2 months to live, 2 months to kind of make his mark, and then it's going to be over. And that is why one of the last things he says to his brother is basically, "Oh my God, the sadness is going to last forever." Meaning, you know, I was trying to get out of this hole. I've been trying to get on top of this terrible situation where I just can't get any traction in this world that I'm living in. I'm just trying to, you know, and then he realized, I guess I've lost this contest. And I want to move on. I want to move back to the letters, but you know, I've also gone on to write 100 books over a period of almost 10 years. And although there's something that came out of that, I certainly learned a lot and so on. I never got any movie deal. People stole my work, but I never got a movie deal. I never got credit for that, where other YouTubers or Core TV or whatever said, wow, you've really done a lot of work here. Let's credit you with that. You actually know a little bit more than the average person. And so in that sense, it actually also feels like a futile attempt. But what is really important in kind of a global sense is that you, even if it was a futile attempt, that you don't think of it that way. You don't think of it as something that is lost or thrown away. Do you understand what I'm saying? Even if it is actually a failure, even if it is actually lost work, even if you actually didn't get what you deserve, it is nevertheless an adventure or even a misadventure that that potentially educates you and does reward you in some way. If you just take that into a different direction, that can make all the difference. And that's what Lucy Charles did. She took this swimming, this incredible dedication to swimming, and she just applied it to triathlon, and the next thing she was world champion, right? And in Van Gogh's case, I'm not quite sure what the answer would have been. You know, again, if he didn't die the way that he did die, I really don't know if he would have lived very much longer. So I think we can say, you know, he did go out with a bang. He did paint his heart's content in the last 2 months of his life. So is there anyone here that is listening to this that this resonates with, where you can say, well, you know, I also remember when I was a child, or when I was a teenager, when I was a young adult, or recently even, where you put in a unfathomable amount of work, and ultimately you failed. Is there anyone here that feels that way? Thanks so much, Josie. Thank you. Well, that's saying it in a very, that's well said. Suffering has its benefits, LOL. So there's a very touching story from Mo Roma, who says, I was on top of the world until my husband was killed in Iraq. No, you could also have a situation where someone is your life, and then they're not there anymore. That can also be totally devastating. You build a life with someone, and then they're just gone. And that's something you can't replace. You can't just, you build a life with someone and then they're gone. Oh, well, I'll just get somebody else. You know, that's lost. It's lost forever. Lynn Lippy, good to see you here. Zircon says, I've never felt I've failed. Okay. What I'm trying to impress upon you guys is the scale of catastrophe that this actually represents. You know, he's gone to the south to put this house together. You know, it's not like he just willy-nilly went to the south. It's been a series of misadventures. You know, he went to the UK to be a minister. That didn't work out. He worked at Goupil. That didn't work out. He worked as a lay pastor in the Borinage. That didn't work out. He stayed with his parents. That didn't work out. He stayed with his brother. That didn't work out. On and on and on and on. And so this in a way is like his last chance. And guess what? He was actually achieving something. You know, he'd actually found his voice. He'd found a kind of an art style. He was sort of finding his way to Starry Night. He painted Stars of the Rhone. You know, he was really on his way. And I mean, just think about this: if the ear incident didn't happen, if Gauguin basically just wasn't such a big arsehole, and maybe Gauguin stayed an extra month or an extra 6 months, what could have been achieved in 1889? And then Van Gogh and Gauguin triumphantly arrived at the World Fair. Imagine that. Imagine if instead of this limping, wounded journey to Saint-Remy, where all he basically paints Starry Night, and the whole world goes nuts about that. But what if there wasn't this interruption? There wasn't all of this dislocation with what do you call it, being thrown out of the town. That's something else I didn't mention. Lucy Charles, when she was in this club and she was winning all the races, somebody put a note into her kit bag saying, leave. Basically, you know, you're better than all of us. We hate you. I just wish you would leave. And she said she put that note in her bedroom on the wall. to remind herself what it's all about, kind of thing. And in a way, that is what Van Gogh also was dealt with. The people of old said, leave, right? Stephanie says to fail doesn't necessarily make someone a failure. Now, how can I put this? The reality of Van Gogh's life is that for all intents and purposes, it is a failure. And I think you can say honestly that was it really his fault? Was it Van Gogh's fault that people didn't buy his art? I suppose you could say he could have dressed better and he could have, I don't know, I'm not quite sure what more he could have done because his brother was an art dealer. Maybe he could have kicked his brother's butt a little bit more to do more. But when in a situation where you paint paintings and nobody buys them, that is ultimately not a successful enterprise, right? And I guess what I'm trying to encourage you guys to do is to admit your own failures and say, okay, that did happen. What am I going to do now? Do I need to make up for that? Do I feel I need to make up for that? Do I forgive myself? Do I feel there's still fuel in the engine? But I think it's an important conversation to have. However you have it and whatever you decide, it's an important conversation to have. I actually think there's more to learn and more to grow from if you can actually say, wow, you know, that was a failure. That was a period in my life cloaked in failure. And I'm better than that, or I want more than that, or whatever it is. So Josie says, I became a master dive instructor and dove to 358 feet only to fall in my bathroom, and that ruined my career. You know, like a statement like that is almost incomprehensible. I mean, that's one sentence, but it's your whole life. It's what changed your whole life. No one at all says sent in another direction by catastrophe. Then Lippy says the important thing is to keep moving forward. So what is so amazing with Lucy Charles's story, and please do watch that link when you can, is she's basically broken. She's broken by life, by circumstances, and that was absolutely necessary to happen for her to change direction. So she swims and she becomes this incredible swimmer, and then people that are kind of outside her control basically put a wall in front of her. In the same way that Van Gogh found himself in a society where no one was really interested in his work. He can't do anything about that, right? And so it was necessary for Lucy to reach that point of being devastated, of being broken, of grieving. And part of that period where she just said, I'm done, I feel nothing, I give up. I'm broken and I'm defeated and I do give up. It was necessary for her to grieve and to let go of all of that so that she could reach for the next thing. Does that make sense? So that grieving period is important. where you mourn this loss of life and time and effort, right? It's important that you do grieve it, but it's also important to come out of it. It's important to go into it. It's also important to come out of it, because that is what allowed her to become a champion in something completely different. If she didn't grieve and just kept swimming, I don't know where she would have gotten. If she only grieved, let's say, a week or 1 month, she wouldn't have the resources that she has now to deal with psychological, what do you call it, challenges in the ordinary grind of professional sports. I mean, there's injuries that happen constantly, right? Okay, so we're going to go back to the letter, but I want you to be just open as we're dealing with his story. Try and be open to your own story. Maybe you've forgotten about some of the things that have happened to you. But make no mistake, what he is losing here is literally his whole life. He's losing a life's work. And he's losing all the momentum that is built up is just going to be lost. And that's going to have to be resurrected a little bit later on. He's going to have to find his way back to that inspiration. And essentially, Starry Night comes at the end of that breaking period, if I can put it that way. I don't mean that the grieving period is over. I don't mean that it was actually just starting. What I mean is it was really at the end of the period of, I want to paint in the Yellow House, I'm trying to become an artist. It was really at the end of that where, well, look at where you are now, you're in this asylum. So it was almost like day one of grieving that he painted Starry Night. And he was going to then be broken down from that point onwards, if that makes sense. Do you guys follow what I'm getting at? And that would take a long time to go from that dip, to go through that dip, come out the other side, and then leave the asylum. Thanks, Robbie Robin. Okay, let's continue. So he says, our ambition has been dashed so low. The reason I've taken you on that little diversion is just to indicate that those words in someone else's life mean big fucking shit has taken place. Someone has really lost chunks of lifetime, and it's a big fucking deal, right? It's not just words, it's a big fucking deal. And so this is what he says. Some people can lose their minds over this sort of thing. Some people can kind of go totally crazy or just make extremely bad life decisions. And all that he does, he says, let's continue working calmly. Let's look after ourselves as best as we can. Let's not exhaust ourselves in futile attempts at mutual generosity. You do your duty and I'll do mine. And as far as that's concerned, we've both already paid for it, and not just in words. What I've just said is not just words. And at the end of the road, we may quietly come together again. But when I am in a delirium and everything I love so much is in turmoil, then I don't mistake that for reality, and I don't play the false prophet. And there you have really, in his own words, what he's saying. Everything I love so much is in turmoil. Have you ever felt like that? It's not something that I love so much is in turmoil. Everything I love so much is in turmoil. And no wonder he's in a delirium. He's kind of confused. Right? And then he says, indeed, illness or death holds no terror for me, but happily for us, ambition is not compatible with the callings we follow. There are so many people in all classes of society, from the highest to the lowest, who believe that anyway. So, this also shows you the kind of strange personality that Van Gogh is kind of a martyr figure. He's not, as much as he seems to want to sell his art, it's really to pay his brother back. He's not trying to be the world's most beloved artist. He's not trying to break any records. He's simply trying to exist. He's simply trying to have a vocation. He's not very ambitious. He simply just wants to survive as an artist. Do you believe him when he says illness or death holds no terror for me? He goes on to say, but why are you thinking about your marriage contract and the possibility of dying just now? So Theo is basically saying to Vincent, Theo, that he's worried himself about death. How's that? Theo is actually in his own hell at this moment, and he's just gotten engaged. Stephanie says, having multiple near-death experiences made me appreciate life. Certainly does, right? And Vincent has just had that himself, and seems like his brother has just had that as well. So he says, wouldn't it be better simply to run your woman through instead? Not quite sure what that means. I think he's kind of making a joke, but it sounds like he's saying, wouldn't it be better simply to just kill your fiance? After all, that's normal practice in the North, and it's not for me to say that practices in the North are no good. I think that's kind of just a bad joke. And then he says, it'll all come all right in the end, believe me. So Theo's going through his own crisis, right? But I, without a penny to my name, I still say that when it comes down to it, money is one kind of currency and painting is another. And I'm even ready to send you a consignment along the lines mentioned in previous letters, and it will get better if my strength returns. So if Gauguin, who is completely infatuated with my sunflowers, takes these two pictures, I should just like him to give your fiance or you a couple of pictures of his. Not a second-rate one, but better than that. So this is Van Gogh kind of engineering a wedding gift from Gauguin to his brother. It's quite crafty, quite clever. He says, and should he take a copy of La Berceuse? I don't think it's a terribly nice painting, but he says, then all the more reason for him to give a good one in return. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to complete the series I spoke to you about, which should be fit to go on show in that same little display window we have gazed at so often. In this case, the value of the pictures does not come into it, and I don't claim to be an expert. It remains, why don't I have this larger? There we are over here. It remains a fact, however, that I may be entitled to attach as much importance to my social position as you do to yours as a local employee. And let me just say this. I think as much of brotherly integrity when it comes to Bossard's money as you do has never played us false. And we have sweated far too much doing good work to get annoyed at being called thieves or incompetents. Anyway, I won't keep on about it. As for the independence, it seems to me that 6 pictures are too many by half. To my mind, the harvest and the white orchard are enough, with the provincial girl or the sower, if you like. I'm just going to jump through this part. He says, as for the little yellow house, when I paid my rent, the landlord's agent was very kind and behaved like an Olympian, treating me as an equal. So I told him that I had no need of a lease, nor of a written assurance or preference, and that in the event of my being ill, payment would only be made by a friendly arrangement. People here have their hearts in the right place, and the spoken word is more binding than the written word. Now, I must say, I really don't know what to make of this. When he says, that he doesn't actually have a written assurance, I don't think that that was very good, but it may also not have been, maybe Van Gogh didn't have a choice. Maybe the landlord basically tricked him and said, you know what, I trust you, I like you, give me the rent in money, and don't worry about contracts, we'll sort that out later. I think that was the landlord's way of being in control. I don't think that was actually Vincent's choice, if you ask me. So let's have a look at what Patricia says. I had a fall in I had a fall in, I think you mean I had a fall in mental signs outside 1 month ago. Wow, so that's Patricia sounds like she's in the midst of a difficult period. Our thoughts are definitely with you, Patricia. I think Vincent had a rental agreement, but it was maybe 6 months. I don't know what's going on with my mouth. I think it was 6 months or something like that, and it was due for renewal, and it wasn't being renewed. He simply just paid for the next month, something like that. Yeah, I also think so. He thought it was kindness. Okay. So I shall keep the house on for the time being, as I need to feel that this is my home if I am to regain my mental health. And I can really understand him saying that and feeling that way. By the same token, the fact that he loses his home is also why he loses his mental health. He needs some stability around him, and that's exactly what he can't hold on to. Okay. So Patricia and others of you watching, I take a lot of courage from Van Gogh's story. Like on the one hand, it's a narrative. On the other hand, I personally feel like, well, at least X, Y, Z in my life isn't anything like what Van Gogh had to go through. You know, there's some comfort in that somebody was dealt a far worse set of cards, circumstances, and he doesn't feel sorry for himself. He doesn't is not bitter. He doesn't blame anybody. He just gets to work and tries to look on the bright side. And as soon as you do blame someone, then you give away that little bit of power that you've got, and that, to his credit, he never really does. So I really do appreciate that from him, from his side. The other thing is, no matter what a failure or what a catastrophe Van Gogh experienced in his life, the amazing thing is the scale and scope of the triumph of his work after his life. You know, it's just incredible. The legacy that he left behind. You know, I think even he would be totally astonished. Liesel, good to see you here. Yvonne says, I must slip out. We'll continue to listen. Liesel says, to be inspired by his resilience. So, you know, you can be resilient even in the face of failure, but I would say, don't just keep swimming. At a certain point, it's okay to try something different, you know. Okay, let's continue. Now, and this is where we are dealing with Theo is also moving. He says, now about your moving from the Rue Lepic to the Rue Rodier. I can't offer any opinion as I haven't seen it. But the main thing is that you two will be lunching at home with your wife. So Theo has also got urgent concerns to deal with. You know, having to move your home is a big deal. By staying in Montmartre, you would all the sooner get decorated and be a minister of arts. But as you are not too keen on that, it is better to have the peace of one's own home. So I think you are quite right. And that is exactly what Van Gogh also wants and needs, except he's just not going to have that. You know, and that's quite an amazing thing just to think about, is how little Van Gogh is ever in one place. Since from when he's about 15, 16 years old, you know, he lives a very itinerant lifestyle where he's here and there and there and there. And, you know, in a situation like that, it's very hard to build any kind of momentum. And now, once again, that momentum is ruined. It is better to have the peace of one's own home. And you know, if you think about it, this is the only real home Van Gogh ever had in his life. Let me say that again. The Yellow House was really the only home Van Gogh ever had in his life. What I mean is a place that he chose, a place that was his for all intents and purposes, a place that he made his own, and a place that he belonged to, right? And what is the period in which this precious situation unfolded? Basically, less than 1 year. Just basically early 1887 till early 1888. Imagine if you could say this: in my entire life, I only had a home for 1 year. Imagine if you said that. Imagine if you felt that. Imagine if that was your experience. So these are real words coming from his heart when he says it is better to have the peace of one's own home. And I know what that feels like, because, you know, I've lived in South Korea and I moved around there. I've lived in the British Isles and I moved around there. I lived in Scotland. I lived in Bristol. I lived in London. I lived in Maidenhead. In South Africa, I've lived all over. And it was often 6 months, 1 year, whatever. And there's a cost to that. Chelsea says he wanted to live happily there with other artists. And so he got his dream for basically 1 year. But the real dream part was where Gauguin was with him, and that was only really 2 months. So how can I put this? If Van Gogh was sitting with us right now and you said, so tell us, how much of your life was like a dream come true? You know, certainly in terms of that Yellow House period, he would probably say, yeah, you know, 1 or 2 months, and, you know, it wasn't bad. We did argue, and he did cut off my ear in the end, and went off without telling me, and stole some of my art. But yeah, those were some of the happiest 2 months of my life. Pretty hectic, right? Zircon says I've moved 50 times. Zircon, would you like to move some more? Would you? If we could pay you some money, would you like to move another 50 times? Well, there you've answered it. Moving is traumatic. It is traumatic. They say moving is one level low in terms of stress when somebody dies. Have you ever heard that? So let's have a, as if we didn't already know this, let's have a look at the top 10 life stresses according to this site. Number 1, death of a spouse. And so, yeah, death of a spouse, divorce, marriage separation, imprisonment, injury or illness. That's what he's going through right here. Marriage is also stressful. Job loss, marriage reconciliation, retirement. But you know, what I would also add to that is moving. Moving is also incredibly stressful. Anyway, let's go back to this. So if you can imagine you've moved 5 times, can you imagine what it would feel like if you've moved 10 times or 15 times and someone says, after you've invested the most you've ever invested in a home, someone says, we not only need you to move out of this house, we need you to move out of the city, if you don't mind. It's going to be pretty stressful. Okay, let's go back to the letter. So he says, I'm a little like that too. I always tell the people here who ask after my health that I shall begin by dying in their midst, and then that my malady will be dead. This doesn't mean I shall not have long spells of respite, but once you are ill in earnest, you know quite well that you cannot contract the same illness twice. You are well or you are ill, just as you are young or old. So he seems quite resigned to the idea of being ill. Like you, I will do what the doctor tells me as much as I can, and I consider that as part of my work and the duty I have to fulfill. I must tell you this, that the neighbors, and this is where I think Van Gogh is maybe trying to butt his brother up, because shortly after this he's going to be kicked out of the town. He says the following: I must tell you this, that the neighbors are particularly kind to me, as everyone here is suffering either from fever or hallucinations or madness. I think he's kind of minimizing what he's going through and trying to normalize and kind of make it sound like everyone's just, got some kind of seasonal thing going on. He says, we understand each other like members of the same family. No, I don't think so. Yesterday, I went to, and this is where I got the title for this video. Yesterday, I went to see the girl to whom I'd gone when I was off my head. There is a rare reference to the ear incident. And again, you see how cryptic it is. It doesn't say, yesterday, I went to see the girl to whom I gave my ear. He says it in a much softer, more euphemistic way. But he acknowledges I was off my head, which is why you can understand art experts saying he must have cut off his own ear, because he acknowledges he was off his head. He acknowledges he was crazy. He says, everyone is going mad here. I was one of them. Anyway, he says, they told me that there's nothing surprising about things like that in this part of the world. This also seems like Van Gogh minimizing to his brother, basically saying, there's nothing to really worry about here. It's normal. Actually, it's not. You know what? I lost my ear. I've got another one. It's not a big deal. Actually, it is a big deal. In the history of the world, there are not too many people who lost their ears. She'd been upset and had fainted, when he gave the ear to her, but had regained her composure, and indeed they spoke well of her. But it won't do for us to think that I'm completely sane. And that's also a very important acknowledgement there. He's saying, I'm not completely fine. As much as he's perhaps buttering his brother up, he's also saying, I'm not completely okay. The people from around here who are ill like me have told me that there will always be times when you take leave of your senses. And that then brings us to this whole question: did he know that he had syphilis? Did he know that people who had syphilis for a long time, what happened to them? Was it a well-known route? And I tend to agree with that. Let's have a look at the poll. Where was I?
Okay, I'm coming to you from the New.
So we're down to 60% say yes. A quarter of you, 24% say no, and almost 20%, almost a fifth, say there's just no way of knowing. Well, guess what? There is a way of knowing in this actual letter, right? Because look at what he says here. I don't ask you to tell people that there's nothing wrong with me or that there never will be. It is just that the explanation of all this is probably not records, but Raspail's. And look at this footnote. He's talking about, he's saying there is something wrong with me. And he's saying, I don't expect you to tell other people that there's nothing wrong with me. And he says, the explanation for what's wrong with me is not his, but his. And there you have it. He's saying it's probably not Records. Who is Philippe Record? A French surgeon specializing in syphilis. And so what Van Gogh is saying is the explanation for what he's experiencing is probably not Records, what's the word? Records assessment of syphilis, but instead Raspail's, who thinks that disease is caused by parasites. Then he says, though I have not yet had the fevers of the region, I might still catch them. So I think he thinks that he might have some kind of parasitic infection, which is not that different from syphilis anyway. But they already know a thing or two about all that here at the hospital. So you can imagine what's going on here is Van Gogh, the ear incident it's not just that he went to the hospital and they helped him to heal from the ear incident. When he was in the hospital, the doctors realized, well, you are actually generally not well, right? The ear incident propelled him into the hospital. When he was in the hospital, the doctors realized there's something else going on with you. You're actually sick. And here he's making the argument that, you know what, I don't think I had syphilis. I think I've got parasites. Actually, no, you do have syphilis. And one does wonder whether Vincent was honest here, because he's got it the wrong way around. He's saying, maybe I just had, some kind of parasitic infection, which maybe he thinks is the lesser of the two. But on the other hand, surely the doctors knew what was going on with him, and the doctors suspected he had syphilis, and maybe he knew that very well. And then he says, as long as you have no false shame and say frankly how you feel, you cannot go wrong. I'm bringing this letter to a close for this evening with a good handshake in my thoughts. Ever yours, Vincent. So I do think it's pretty clear that he was aware of syphilis and knew that he had it. Stephanie, I think the reason is because it doesn't sell very well. It's not a story that uplifts his art. You know, the mad artist story is a purist story, and it kind of suggests that Van Gogh sacrificed himself for his art. You know what I mean? Whereas the sickness side is so much more. What's the word? It's very. It's a very common, uninspiring thing to happen to a human being. You know, it's basically just not very inspiring, and so it's not a very good story to say, you know what, we can explain a lot of who Van Gogh was because he had syphilis. It's just not a very exciting thing to hear. Whereas if you say, you know what, Van Gogh was this mad artist. He was this really crazy guy. You know, he was so committed to his art that he, you know, when his friend left him, he got so upset he cut off his ear, and he was just a really intense artist, and he was so intense that he was kind of mad about it. So it's a much more compelling, riveting story than da 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 because of syphilis and blah 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 blah, syphilis, syphilis, syphilis. Yes, syphilis is a bacterial infection, but you must remember in 1889 they didn't really understand it very well. You know, antibiotics were quite new at that time. In fact, I'm not actually sure if antibiotics existed at that time. I know I researched this when I wrote my book. Just want to see when antibiotics came online. Penicillin was discovered in 1928. So basically, the way to treat syphilis was 30 years after Van Gogh lived, if that makes sense. I don't know if you guys know that when during the plague, I think they called it the Black Plague, people didn't understand what germs were. So people didn't know a very simple way to solve these sorts of outbreaks was wash your hands and cover your mouth if you sneeze. And so what they thought was they did have a perception that there's dirty air, but I mean that's not very a hard perception to understand. You know, there were rats and horse manure in the streets and so on, and so the air would have smelled pretty bad. And so the idea that foul substances were like gases were being carried through the air did kind of make sense, but it was a little bit more than that. It was germs that attached to substances, and if you touch other things, then they transferred. But people didn't understand that, and their idea of dealing with the plague was by smoking it out, by using smoke and by burning flowers and all sorts of things and wearing masks and that kind of thing. They still didn't really know that germs existed and how germs functioned. And, you know, just a little thing like that, you know, one note that is off ruins the whole symphony. One little thing that you just don't understand about your world can kill you. You know, if you don't understand how germs are transferred and you're in a situation of a pandemic or an epidemic, not knowing that can cost you your life, right? That's the answer, yeah. Thanks a lot, Chelsea. Okay, so let's go to the next letter. So, by the way, I actually missed this letter, and Stephanie, reminded me that this was an important letter and one that talks about this whole syphilis aspect. A very rare letter that does that. It's literally like one out of very, very few. And guess what? We go from this letter where he's quite positive in a way. He's like quite calling a spade about a lot of things, but also quite positive. We go to this letter from Reverend Sauls on the 26th of February. And what do you think? Do you think it's going to be good news to Theo? Every time you hear from Reverend Sauls, you think it's going to be a good news. And so even though Van Gogh thinks, I've just got parasites, I'll be okay, all this is passing, I just need the stability of my home. Well, not really. So this letter was written tomorrow, 135 years ago. Tomorrow, it was written tomorrow, exactly 135 years ago. And this is what he writes: Monsieur, your poor brother has been taken into the hospital again. As you will undoubtedly have heard from him, he had returned to his house a few days ago. However, his behavior and the way he talked made me fear that the improvement which had taken place was only apparent. This fear, which we all had, proved only too well founded. A petition signed by some 30 neighbors informed Monsieur the Mayor of the inconvenience caused by allowing this man his complete liberty. So you really do get the feeling that this reverend is actually Van Gogh's enemy, like a mortal enemy, is this guy. It's almost like a sheep in wolf's clothing. This guy that's been writing to his brother probably more than anyone else wants this filthy Dutch dude out of their town. And here he tells Theo, a petition's been signed by 30 neighbors. What did we just read in the previous letter? Where Vincent said that the neighbors are so awesome. I must tell you that the neighbors are particularly kind to me, really. Well, they've signed a petition where they want to get rid of him. The superintendent of police to whom the document was submitted has immediately had your brother taken back to the hospital with the express order not to let him leave. He came to my house to inform me of the situation and to ask me to write to you. And so this also makes complete sense of the landlord not wanting a contract. Remember where he says, I had no need of a lease nor a written assurance of preference. I don't think Vincent said to him, no, don't give me a contract. I think the landlord kind of fooled him into not signing a contract because this allowed him to kick him out at the end of that month. It is clear that a decision has to be made. Is it your intention to come and take your brother with you or to put him yourself into an institution of your own choice? But he's basically saying it's because of this reverend that Van Gogh basically, that his Yellow House dream goes up in flames. Or do you prefer to leave it in the hands of the police? On this point, we should have a categorical reply. So this reverend really is merciless. He really is a dick, isn't he? Will you, without hesitation, make your intentions known and address them either to myself or to the mayor? And you see how serious this is? The mayor of the town, the police, they all like, okay, this is serious. This guy needs to go. We will only act after having received your reply and will act according to your wishes. I'd rather hope to have some better news, and that stopped me from writing to you sooner to acknowledge receipt of your letter and the 50 francs that it contained. This sum I've taken to my home by the cleaning woman. My deepest sympathies, and I assure you of my best wishes, Sauls. Pretty shocking, right? Then there's another letter on the 1st of March, and I think we're going to stop at this letter. Let's just have a look at the next one. It's another letter. from Souls. Anyway, so on the 1st of March, Souls writes, Monsieur, I've been to see your brother in hospital and found him tolerably well. Everybody, the intern, the bursar, and the board of directors are well disposed in his regard. And it has been decided that someone will accompany him tomorrow to his house to fetch his brushes and colors to give him something to do during his stay in hospital. However, the question remains the same. The Central Commissioner, who has the petition I spoke to you about and who conducted the inquest in the neighborhood, remains convinced that he was right to take these measures. That sounds like the chief of police. Meanwhile, it seems to me it is also the view of Monsieur Ray that it would be a kind of cruelty to lock up a man who has not done any harm to anyone and who can, with kindness and goodwill, return to his normal state. Yeah, it definitely is. Definitely is. I repeat, he has on his side the best will of all those that attend him at the hospice, and everything is being done to make it possible to avoid his transfer to a mental asylum. Do you believe him? Do you believe that he says, everyone is on his side? They're just 30 neighbors who've signed a petition, and I've participated in that, but everything is being done to avoid that. Maybe not. In any case, if they succeed in returning him to his normal state, it would be necessary that he gives up his current accommodation and move to another quarter of the city. This is the opinion of everybody. That's pretty shocking. Can you imagine if you saw that this letter, can you imagine if Theo sent this letter to Vincent and said, what do you think about this? This is what the people of Aal are saying behind your back. It would be humiliating, embarrassing, it would be crushing, wouldn't it? It would be devastating. Now imagine if on top of that, a month ago, you've almost lost your life, you've lost your ear, you've lost your friend, and now the entire town are turning on you as well. I give you my best regards, sir, and my best wishes, Souls. Okay, let's read another letter. I'm trying to get to the 2-hour mark. 2nd of March, the very next day, he writes, I've just received your letter and felt I must add some further comments. Your brother is interned in the hospital on the orders of the police. Why do you think that's the case? Because the people have basically said, complained to the police and said, do something about this guy. This petition, which I've read, certifies that his appearances and his acts are those of a lunatic and that there's a real danger to leave him at liberty. Since his admission to hospital, the commission has made an inquiry of the signatories to the petition. Now, again, if you think about just let's go into the true crime space. If you think about the statement Van Gogh made at the beginning of the month, this is now almost a month later, he's saying to his brother, everyone here is mad. He's normalizing this idea of madness. Why? Because he knows he's behaved in a inexcusable way. And so he's basically telling his brother something because he probably knows that he's going to be told about it anyway. And so he's almost trying to take the wind out of the sails of that kind of thing, right? You know what I mean? And then this happened. But can you see how Van Gogh had a strategy to basically say to his brother, yeah, maybe I went a bit crazy, but all of us are crazy in some way, and everyone in this town's crazy. And I went to see the girl that I gave my ear to, and she said she fainted, but everyone said, yeah, it's normal. We all kind of have these little phases. He's trying to make it seem like it's not really a big deal. Actually, it was a very big deal. I'm just conveying how Van Gogh can be a little tricksy and cryptic right? In the way he is not always completely honest. There's a little bit of strategy, I think, in what he's trying to achieve. Wolfwoman, wow, thank you so much. That's really generous of you. Do you believe Van Gogh was? Do you believe Van Gogh was at? Can you maybe just repeat the question? Do you believe Van Gogh was something due to his authenticity? Do you believe Van Gogh was a target due to his authenticity and natural gifts? Okay, that's an interesting question. Interesting question. Was he a target? Well, he definitely was a target. Was he a target because of his authenticity? For sure. I mean, he was in a way naively pursuing his dream of being an artist, and he wasn't really thinking, like, how can I put it? He wasn't thinking what other people might think of him. You get some people who genuinely are less concerned with what people think in a superficial way of themselves. And I think those people are relatively rare. Some people who genuinely are so committed and so intensely preoccupied with what they're trying to do that they don't really realize what people are thinking around them. Maybe the psychology passes them here and there, but it sort of often catches them by surprise. Van Gogh in 1888 was kind of at his most authentic. The old Yellow House thing was totally him giving expression to who he really was. He was creating a home that felt like the sort of place that was him, that represented him, that was the kind of place that he wanted to be in, right? Everything he was doing was he was in a way actualizing himself, right? And ultimately, it did make himself a target. That the yellow of the house probably stood out. The fact that he is actually an outsider stood out. The fact that he's an artist stood out. The fact that he was working so hard just at art stood out. If he had worked part-time as an artist and worked as a barman or a street sweeper or a journalist or a librarian or a magazine illustrator, all of those things would have made him more like a member of society. The fact that he's an artist kind of made him like an outside eccentric kind of person. Do you know what I mean? As soon as you've got a regular job, you're working with a local, but he was always working kind of independently. So good question, and I do think you're right about that. Do you guys agree? Do you guys agree that he was not only authentic and pursuing this authentic life, but that kind of made him vulnerable and a target to all those around him? Because all those around him feel like this guy's really different. He's really weird. He's really not like us. Let's get rid of him. We don't really understand what he's doing. Let's get rid of him. Thanks a lot, Vandimas. Thank you. Wolfwoman, I hope that answered your question. Okay, let's go back to this letter. Let's go to there. So he says, his appearances and his acts are those of a lunatic, and that there is a real danger to leave him at liberty. Since his admission to hospital, the Commissioner has made an inquiry of the signatories of the petition. You understand it is all done discreetly and without noise. Depositions have been collected in writing and filed. Don't tell me Van Gogh is not a true crime story. I've read some, and my impression is that they're exaggerated. So that is quite interesting, that the Reverend basically says, you know, some of the depositions are probably dishonest. To his credit, he does say that. Evidently to the point where the neighbors fear your brother and they have overexcited each other. That sounds fair. The acts that they reproach your brother with, supposing they are true, do not justify accusing a man of insanity and to request his imprisonment. That's also a very that's a fair assessment. They say that the children flock around him and run after him, and that he, on his part, chases them, and he could hurt them, and that he drinks in excess. There you have it. There you have confirmation that it's not just syphilis, it's also drinking and also womanizing. The cafe owner, his neighbors, told me exactly the opposite, that he doesn't drink in excess. Okay. Finally, that women fear him because he has seized some by the waist, as engaged in touching their persons. That definitely, I think, is true. I wouldn't be surprised if he did drink in excess. I mean, he paints absinthe, and he was with Gauguin, so maybe before Gauguin got there, he didn't drink in excess, but when Gauguin got there, it brought out that side of him. Unfortunately, the act of madness that necessitated his first admission to the hospital has resulted in a most unfavorable interpretation of all the eccentric acts the poor young man has engaged in. What do you think he's talking about there? The act of madness that necessitated his first admission. Well, it was Van Gogh losing his ear. Right? So basically, this story has kind of gone viral in all. This crazy guy cut off his own ear. He's nuts, whatever. We must get rid of him. That's a totally different situation if it was that Gauguin had cut off his ear. And I wonder whether Gauguin didn't spread that story. But let's just say, if Gauguin had cut off his ear, would there be any need to kick him out of his home? In any other person, they would perhaps not be noticed, but for him, they immediately take on particular importance. I hope, despite the conviction of the Central Commissioner and his resolution to incarcerate your brother, that we will succeed in keeping him here, and that we will be able to avoid what you, with just reason, fear. So this is Van Gogh's in an extremely delicate situation. The people want to, it's almost like they want to, what do you call it? It's almost like a witch hunt, right? And they want to kick him, they want to throw him out of the village, right? I don't know why I've still got this in my ear. They want to throw Van Gogh out of the village. And those who don't want to throw him out of the village want to imprison him, right? And people are actually scared of him, that they're scared of this guy that they think is nuts. And people are basically scared of Van Gogh. And I mean, if you think about the letters that we've gone through, the hundreds of letters that we've gone through, is there anything to fear from Van Gogh? Is basically, I think the only thing that should fear Van Gogh is a blank canvas, because that's what he attacks. He attacks canvases, right? As I told you yesterday, everyone in the hospital is well disposed to him, and after all, it is the physicians and not the commissioner who must be judges in these cases. Yours faithfully, Saul. So Saul started off, I think he was one of the villagers who thought this dude is a sicko, and having investigated him and having spoken to people, he seems to have appraised himself that actually, oh, this is the situation. He is quite a harmless guy, and some people have gotten overexcited, maybe a bit hysterical. Then he says, yours faithfully, Saul. P.S. I fully take note of what you tell me in your letter and will make my duty to do as you wish when I believe it is necessary. For the moment, your brother is well enough and can attend to his own business. So I wonder what wish Theo expressed. Maybe Theo said, if it is necessary, put him on a train, or if it is necessary, maybe he should be admitted to an asylum. I wonder what it is. Just want to see how long this letter is. Do you guys want me to read this letter as the final letter? It's 16 March 1889. What do you guys say? Read one last letter, or what do you guys think? Brockett says, I don't think society has changed much. I'm the aunt of 2 autistic kids. It's a crying shame that people are ostracized for their differences. No one at all says. Well, yeah, but the thing is, I think they were prostitutes, and I don't think he was the only person doing that. I don't want to sound like I'm defending that kind of behavior, but in context, I think he was in a house of ill repute. Another thing to consider is, was he doing that before Gauguin? Because probably after this point, he's not going to be doing that again, but who knows? Okay, so let's read this last letter. 16th of March, so quite a long period of time passes. There's no correspondence that we know from Vincent. More than 2 weeks pass. And how many weeks passed since Vincent's previous letter? It's been 3 weeks since Vincent has written to his brother. So it's quite a big jump in time. And bear in mind, we're now getting very close to Starry Night. Starry Night was painted in April 1889. So we're getting very, very close to that point. Just want to confirm that. Looks like it's a little bit later. It's May 1889. May 23rd, 1889. Okay, we are getting quite close to that point. So 2 months from this point, basically, will be when he paints Starry Night. 2 months, around about 2 months. Okay, so this is what Theo writes to his brother. My dear brother, I hear that you are not better yet, which causes me a good deal of grief. I so wish you could tell me how you are feeling, for there's nothing more distressing than this uncertainty. And if you could tell me how things are with you, I might be able to do something sooner to give you solace. And so, do you see now how Vincent has been telling his brother just the good stuff? although he does acknowledge things aren't perfect, is not really being completely truthful with him. And so he says, I wish you would tell me how you are feeling. You have done so much for me that it is a great sorrow for me to know that precisely at this time, when in all probability I'm going to have days of happiness with my dear Joe, you are passing through days of misery. And you can also imagine that that is featuring in Van Gogh's thought process, which is how can I tell my brother that things are so terrible when he is in the situation that he's in with he's about to get married. And so you can kind of imagine that he just feels that he can't be completely honest with his brother as he once could, because his brother is kind of preoccupied with other things. And that's exactly right. He doesn't want Theo to worry. But of course, Theo is worrying, and it is very worrying what's taking place here. But this, I think, also shows just how resilient Van Gogh is that he can be going through this horrible time where people are saying horrible things about him. The police want to throw him in jail. His neighbors have signed a petition, and they want to kick him out of his home, and he doesn't even say anything to his brother about that. Shows you someone who's pretty mentally tough. I mean, he doesn't just write to his brother and say, boo hoo hoo hoo, so terrible what's happening to me. Everyone's picking on me. Can you please help me? I don't know what to do. I feel so helpless and hopeless. He doesn't say anything about that. That's how mentally tough Van Gogh actually is. He takes all of this and doesn't say anything about it. And so his brother's got to reach out to him after 3 weeks and say, what's going on? I'm so worried about you. I'm hearing all this stuff. What's going on? And Theo, intuitive and sensitive Theo, says, I can understand, it causes me great sorrow to know that at the time that things are going well with me, that you are going through such a horrible time. And that is also what makes the trouble and the suffering so much worse. When Lucy missed the Olympics, it's not just that she misses the Olympics, she then watches the Olympics, watches someone that she's either better than or just as good as, having this experience that she could have had, that she deserved but just didn't get, right? And all of that kind of thing also has a really strong wounding impact on a person. When I was at school, those first 7 years were pretty perfect. I had a really good childhood, but I was a really complete person, academically strong, very good in many different sports, free state or provincial colors in swimming, in biathlon, in football, right? And then I go to high school, and then all of that just disappears. And meanwhile, but it's not just that. The people around you continue to excel, and they grow, and they have their fairy tales. Meanwhile, you stuck in your sort of on your treadmill of misery, or whatever you want to call it, of distress. It's not, what makes that distress so much harder is the people around you continue to, live their lives and get what they want and what they deserve, and it just feels like no matter what I do, I just can't get out of this cycle. No matter how hard I try, or what strategy, or how smart I am, or whatever thing I try, I'm just doomed to be in this. It's almost like when you pull the plug, and the last water, there's nowhere for that water to go except down that drain. And it just feels like one has to go through that route in order to come out somewhere else. There's just no escape from that sort of thing. That's just what it feels like. And anyway, so he says, you are passing through days of misery. Joe had the fond idea that by reason of her wanting to live my life as much as possible, you might have been a brother to her as you have always been to me. And, ultimately, that is what Joe was. Joe was like Vincent's sister, in that she took Vincent's work as a sister might, as a family member might. Although not, I don't know whether, this is quite a thought. If Joe wasn't in the picture, I don't know whether any other Van Gogh would have respected and appreciated and done as much with his work as what she did. Isn't it that saying that there's contempt in families, or contempt in, there's a thing in the Bible that says a prophet is ridiculed in his own hometown. Have you ever heard that kind of thing? And so it's interesting that Joe is like a sister, but not an actual sister, who does play this sisterly role in looking after his work in an interesting way. Zircon says the new husband profited. That's something, that's a part to that story you don't really hear much about, is Joe's second husband. What's interesting is Theo is quite heartfelt. It's quite a personal, emotional letter from Theo. He says, as you have always been to me, you've always been a brother to me. We hope from the bottom of our hearts that you'll be able to recover your health completely, and that you'll be able to resume your work within a short time. While arranging my new apartment, so there's confirmation from him that that's what he's been up to. It is such a pleasure for me to look at your pictures. They make the room so gay. You can see Theo is working hard to try and build his brother's confidence, to try and give his brother a sense of validation. His brother is now kind of at the bottom of the hill, and his brother is near the top. Things are going well in his brother's life. Things are almost as bad as they could possibly be in Vincent's life. He's really at a nadir. And so he says, there's such an intensity of truth, of the true countryside in each of them. Wolf Woman was asking about authenticity. Well, there you have it. The intensity of his authenticity coming through in this true representation of the countryside. It is really, as you used to say now and then of certain pictures of other artists, that they give the impression of having been reaped directly from the fields. If it were not so far away, I should certainly have come to see you, but I don't have the time for that. And I asked myself if my visit would be of any use to you. And that is certainly quite sad, is that at the time that this happens to Vincent, he is literally abandoned by everybody, right? So Gauguin abandons him. Rouland, I won't say Rouland abandons him, but the postman kind of moves on, and Rouland was his friend in all. Probably without Rouland in all, there wasn't anyone to counter all these rumors that were kind of being spread. All the people of all the neighbors, they all ganging up on him, against him. And even his own brother, as much as his brother's supporting him, his brother never came to all to support him, or to I don't know, to visit him. his brother came to Old to collect Gorgad and then went back immediately. In the entire time that Vincent was in Old and Saint-Remy, his brother never visited him a single time. And on the one hand, although that seems cruel and sad, on the other hand, you can kind of understand his brother's engaged. It's a little bit surprising, but his brother's engaged, his brother's moving, his brother's preoccupied. And so you can see that Vincent was incredibly vulnerable at the time that this happened. And it must have also been very disheartening that his brother didn't come and visit him. His brother, who's his greatest friend, really, is someone who is really protecting him from the slings and arrows of the outside world, doesn't even come down to see him, even though he's in an extremely severe peril. You know, he could be thrown in jail, he could be kicked out of the town, right? And that also must be a bitter pill for Van Gogh to swallow. So when Theo says, I asked myself if my visit would be of any use to you, that seems a bit unfair, because I think it would have been of great use to him. Signac intends to go to the south within a short time. So basically says, I'm not going to come and see you, but Signac might. He will go to see you. I'm now having an exhibition of Claude Monet at the gallery. You can also kind of understand Theo can't just kind of leave and go south. It's not like you catch a plane. It's expensive to go south, and he does have a job, and quite big things are happening at this time, including, think about that, should he just say, sorry, Claude Monet, I'm just going to not do this. My brother's having a breakdown. We're just going to cancel your exhibition. Do you mind? Anyway, he says it is very successful. It will not be long before the public will be asking for pictures of the new school, for they certainly stir up the public mind. So Claude Monet is a contemporary of Van Gogh. And what's pretty incredible is that Van Gogh's work, in the minds of some, eclipse Monet's. I have to say, if you, and don't shoot me when I say this, if you offered me the average Claude Monet painting and you offered me the average Vincent van Gogh painting, I'd probably take the Monet. I like that kind of soft art. And although there's some beautiful Van Gogh paintings, Claude Monet's, I think, are what's the word? In general, superior. Are they more valuable? Probably not, although they are incredibly valuable as well. But it's quite incredible that Theo had access to Monet's work as well. Now, I just want to show you guys a couple of Monet's artworks. Funny enough, today I was walking with Timmy, and I said to a friend of mine that where we're walking is a lot like Monet's pond, because we walk there quite often, and it's always, the sun is different, the light on the water and the grass is different, and this is a local version, I guess, of Monet's pond. You guys know what I'm referring to. So let's, and by the way, Monet is a French artist. So it's not as though the French don't understand artists. They certainly understood him. He was also a plein air landscape artist like Van Gogh. I just want to show you a couple of his paintings. Look how beautiful that is. Let's put this up like that. I think that's a pastel. Now compare that self-portrait. Is that a self-portrait? Just want to have a look. I was going to say, well, that's not a self-portrait. It's just a portrait of Claude Monet. Looks very different to Van Gogh, doesn't it? But these are some of Monet's paintings. Let's do that. I think he's technically superior to Van Gogh. What do you guys think? I mean, that is a beautiful painting, isn't it? Look at the detail. Now, Van Gogh on his best day can't execute with this level of detail, if you ask me, in terms of faces and so on. Do you agree? Okay. Is there anyone else that would rather have a Van Gogh than a Monet? I think that might be him over there. Now that's quite a famous one. I've definitely seen that one before, and I must say, France. That feels a lot like France. You do see these poppies in the landscape. I know I saw them when I was there. You can see that it's got a quality. Look down here. That reminds us a bit of Van Gogh's style. Look down here. This sort of area. Van Gogh's style is a bit more vigorous, but it certainly is to some extent a similar style, and it looks like you can also see through the canvas on this picture as well. See over there, over there. So Monet seems to be capable of a more varied palette than Van Gogh. You know, the colors also seem slightly truer than Van Gogh's colors, where Van Gogh uses so much yellow, so much green. One of the things that Monet liked was pollution. It tended to give a softer hue to scenes. He actually liked pollution. So that's the famous pond that Monet painted, and I actually wanted to go there when I went to Auvers-sur-Oise. Maybe if I visit France again, can make a turn there. There you can see he's painting these huge paintings of that pond. Just trying to think what that place is called. It's not, isn't it Gumeni or something? What is that place called where he painted it? Maybe it's in chat. No such luck. I know it starts with a G. Oh, can't seem to find it. Giveni, that's it. See, now another case is like, is it Gumeni? No, that's Pavel. Giveni. That's it. Thanks, guys. Beautiful, right? And you can imagine throughout the year how it changes color, and throughout the day how this would change color as well. And I'm trying to think who I was with, because I have actually seen some of these big Claude Monets. I think it was at the Museum of Modern Art. Stephanie, wasn't it with you? Weren't you there when we saw that? No, I must say I wouldn't particularly want that in my lounge. Chelsea says I saw quite a few at the moment. They're big, right? Big artworks. I think that might be one of them. It's a pretty big painting. And so it goes on and on and on. There's a painting that was used with the help of pollution, right? There's another one. Oh, did Stephanie have to go? Well, that's a shame. That's Venice. I think that's one of those really big pictures. There you get a sense of it. I think I've actually been in this room, Musée de l'Orangerie in Paris. Certainly, I've seen pictures like these in the museum in New York. Very, very big pictures. I actually took some video as well. Okay, so anyway, that is Monet. Was Theo supposed to sort of just leave that and attend to his brother? And you can imagine, yeah, couldn't he have taken a weekend somewhere? Maybe he felt he couldn't afford it. Anyway, he says, sorry, it's this letter here. He says it is very successful. It will not be long before the public will be asking for pictures of the new school. If you can, you would be most kind if you'd give me, or at least someone give me, news about you. For apart from the letters from Mrs. Ray and Soles, I know nothing about you. I wish you better health and remain your brother who loves you, Theo. And so that's where things stand. So the 16th of March, I wonder how long it takes for Vincent to respond to his brother. Well, that's quite serious. He doesn't write back immediately. He writes back on the 19th of March. We'll deal with these letters in Van Gogh letters 76. So, well, I must say, I thought I was going to cut it off at 2 hours. We're almost heading to the 3-hour mark. So I must let you know, I probably will do Van Gogh letters 76, but there'll probably be a 2-week break between 76 and 77, because I'm probably going to take a little bit of a mini break myself. So that'll also help the days to catch up to where we need to be. Because at this point, we're not even in March, and the letters are so far ahead of us. So we kind of need to slow things down. It is unusual for Vincent. It's unusual. They are huge in real life. MoMA is the Museum of Modern Art in Manhattan. Chelsea, that's why you've got to use video to do like a pan to capture the whole painting. Okay, so that's it from me. I hope you guys found something in this particular Van Gogh letters. Like I say, I think it is worth thinking about some of the lowest times in your life where you were broken or grieving, where you lost a lot, where it was definitely a failure. No matter what spin you want to put on it, it was definitely a period of defeat. And then also how you came away from that, but then also where you are today. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like you've got some unfinished business? So I hope, to the extent that you really address this, you don't have to address it in chat, but that you think about it in your own life. This can actually be quite helpful and healing for you. And so my hope is that it is. Mickey, thank you so much. Appreciate it. No one at all. Thanks a lot. Yeah, you're right, Laurie. Is this Laurie from South Carolina? Snowline, also good to see you. What was the other thing I wanted to say? So just something that's for me, something I'm feeling pretty good about. I had a pretty devastating injury about 2 years ago, and a bone bruise. I went for an MRI. Hey, Laurie, and I'm happy to say that over the last couple of days, I've been able to get on my treadmill and run for the first time. It is definitely the most serious injury I've ever had, and it's, if you compare it to injuries I've had, you might say you're crazy. How could that injury have been worse than that one? But I've never had an injury where I couldn't run for 2 years, and so I'm happy to be running again. I just hope I'm going to be able to keep running. Thanks a lot, Deborah. I'm also sorry you missed most of it. Today, when I was walking, I actually almost rolled my ankle. I mean, I was wearing proper shoes. It was just the terrain was getting a little bit dark, and there are lots of sort of round rocks. Almost rolled my ankle. But I'm at the highest level of fitness that I've been in over a year. Not more than 2 years, but certainly over a year, which I'm really happy about. But touch wood that I don't get injured again and that I can continue getting fitter. This period has been quite devastating for me. I've always been fit my whole life, and so it's been quite a shock to literally not be able to run for more than a year. So far, today I ran over 4 kilometers and I walked 3. So far, so good. I don't know how long my knee's gonna handle what I'm putting it through, but so far, I don't really have. I won't say I don't have any pain, but I've got a little bit of pain. What makes Lucy Charles' story so incredible was she battled injuries the whole of last year, and then she made it to the starting line of the Ironman World Championship. And she said every step of the run was painful. Every single step that she took hurt, and yet she won that race. She set a record in the swim, bike, and run. That shows incredible commitment. That shows incredible resilience. That shows incredible strength of mind. And what's also amazing was she'd competed in these world championships something like 5 times and come second once, come second again, come second again, came second again. I think 4 or 5 times she came second. The 5th time she was actually injured. She ran with a injury, but she went to a backup running time, and she won the race anyway. So that is someone who's, and all of that is built on the failure, the defeat of when she was denied the Olympics. It just made her hungrier and stronger and more resilient than if she just got what she wanted and it was an easy thing. So, this is an incredible story. So I really want to recommend that you go and watch some of her videos. It's a really nice person, but also a tough person who wasn't given the easiest route to get where she wanted to go, and it just shows you how important resilience is, and how important the right psychology is, and how also important freaking hard work is. Don't forget about that part. And the other thing that's so amazing with her is the swimming was something that she'd learned how to be like a professional swimmer. And so when she took that into triathlon, that was one thing she didn't really need any help with. And so one out of those three sports was already taken care of, put it that way. Wolfwoman says, I've chills. Great to hear that. Sounds good. Anyway, thanks for being here. I hope you guys have found this meaningful and helpful. I hope it's inspiring for you. I hope my shirt is inspiring you guys. And I hope you guys have a good week. And those of you who are going through trials and tribulations right now, well, you've got a community here. So let us know how you're doing. Let us know next week how you're doing. We all Theos and Vincents here, all 42 of us. To your success. Thank you. Put up the link again. Let's see if I can. Well, do you think Van Gogh knew he had syphilis has gone down to 57%? I think the answer is yes. 20% said there's just no way of knowing. No, there actually is a way of knowing. Look at his letters. Let me just see if I can find that again.
From the new City.
I believe it's this video. Are you guys ready for the link? This video. Make sure you watch it after this one. And yeah, I recommend you subscribe to Team Charles Barkley. It's got some pretty good. I love watching that while I'm running on the treadmill. There's also. Oh, hang on. It's actually this. This is the episode. Sorry, I actually got the wrong one. It's this one. It's Rise of a Champion, Lucy Charles Barkley Evolution. I thought I had the wrong one. Sorry, this is the link you want to look at. This is the right link. It's called Rise of a Champion, Lucy Charles Barkley. And then another video that I highly recommend is where she takes questions. Is it this one? Where she talks about her journey. Really, like I've already watched this video so many times. Here. So I really recommend this. So these two links right at the bottom here, watch the top one and then watch the bottom one, and the other one that I put up earlier you can also watch, but it'll really move you, maybe even move you to tears. Okay, thanks very much, guys. Thanks for being here. Thank you so much for the super chats. Welcome to all the new subscribers. And what does Beck say? I changed my mind from one to yes after the show. Yeah, you can't re-vote. Rookie says, always learn something from you. Thank you for reading these letters. Always great. Cool. Thanks very much. Okay, guys. I'm going to bid you guys adieu. I hope you have a good rest of your Sunday, and I'll see you guys right about this time next week, Sunday. Okay. Again, thanks very much. See you guys next week. Ciao.